Are we recording, Barb?
You are.
Okay. Well, then we will call to order this TIF Commission for the City of Olivet, March 29th, 2021 at 7 p.m. I think the first item on our agenda is the roll call. Mr. Carl? And you are muted, just so you know. Okay, we'll give Commission Member Carl a chance to get his technology suited there.
If Mr. Carl is having a technology problem, may I ask, is it possible to have the city manager who might have the list of attendees to call roll?
Barb, are you prepared to do that?
Yes.
That'd be great, thank you. I'll note, however, that Mr. Carl, it looks like he's dropped off. But you can go ahead with the roll call and we'll acknowledge his attendance here, albeit intermittent.
Marion Gee.
Here.
Jeff Springer.
Here.
Keisha Lee.
Present.
Andy Bressler.
Here.
Jay Nelson.
Present.
Kevin McKenna.
Present.
Gail Schote, sorry.
Here.
Andrea Nelson Roberts.
Present.
Paul Hamble.
Here.
Richard Brophy.
Present.
And I believe I don't see Commissioner Carl on yet, but I know we will note when he is back on.
Yes.
And I'll be watching for him in the attendees.
Thank you. So with that, I think the next item of business is to approve the minutes from our February 8th, 2021 meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, we
I'd
have a
like
motion.
to, you didn't call me as present, but I'm here.
Oh, our
Oh, I'm
apologies.
sorry. Oh, you were right at the top. I'm sorry, Stephanie. I apologize.
Thank you for correcting that oversight. So we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Ms. Sondag, do we need to go through an entire roll call for that motion, or are we good with just a motion?
I'll tell you what, if I could just use first names and people can just raise their hands, would that be, we do have to do, when you have a motion, we do have to do roll call, and that's by the charter. So
Okay,
so I'm going to start with Stephanie now this time. Gail? Andrea? Okay. Paul? Thank you. Kevin?
Sure.
Jay? Okay. Andy? Keisha? Jeff? Marion? And Richard.
okay. I guess we're still waiting
I'm
on.
bringing back Mr. Carl right now.
Great,
He's in the attendees, so we're up to full snuff again.
full strength, great.
My apologies, everyone. I was trying to bring up the stuff to read the roll and my computer locked up.
No problem. So I think I'll hand it over now to Mr. Spikerman, who's going to present an overview of the purpose for our public hearing tonight. And you're muted.
Thank you, Chairman Brophy. My name is Mark Spikerman. I'm an attorney with Gilmore and Bell. We are special counsel to the city on TIF matters, including this project. We represent cities all across the St. Louis area as well as the state on TIF matters. You are all here today because you are members of the TIF Commission of the City of Olivet. The TIF Commission, under the TIF Act, has the role of holding a public hearing, soliciting input from the public, and ultimately making a recommendation to the city of Olivet whether they should approve or disapprove the proposed amendment to the Gateway 170 redevelopment plan. Just briefly, the Gateway 170 redevelopment plan, as you know, refers to a redevelopment area located in the southeast corner of the Olive and 170 interchange. It was originally approved both by the TIF Commission and the City of Olivet in 2017. It was amended in 2019, again approved by both the TIF Commission and the City of Olivet. And it's here before you again this year with another amendment. The purpose of this amendment is to increase the private investment in the project by more than double, add residential uses, multifamily residential uses to the project. And there's also a small increase in the amount of TIF assistance as well. The TIF Act requires that any amendment that changes the general land uses, the general nature of the redevelopment project, goes back before the TIF Commission to hold a new public hearing. And that's why we're here today, because this amendment is significant enough that it triggers a new TIF Commission public hearing. With that said, we can happy to answer any questions, or Chairman, you can go ahead and open the public hearing if you like, and then I would turn it over to Greg to give a overview of the project.
All right, any questions for Mr. Spikerman before we move on? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing now, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Yawitz to explain the purpose of the proposed amendment. Mr. Yawitz, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I appreciate you all being here tonight. I am Greg Yawitz. I am the managing partner of Keat Olivet Gateway, the developer entity for what is now Olive Crossing. I have with me tonight a number of members of my team, including my partner, Rusty Keeley, who is trying to log in. I'm not sure, he's having a little trouble with it. He'll be here. He's the CEO of the Keeley Companies, which is a diversified construction and infrastructure firm that also happens to be one of the main contractors on the new MLS stadium down in the city. Jason Braidwood, who is president of KDG, which is a real estate development and management firm, who's been involved in the development of a number of offices, office buildings and multifamily projects. Laura Lashley, our economic consultant, and Bill Remus, our lead attorney, in case, again, there are any questions that I cannot answer. And for those of you, I don't know if I talked about this last time, so I hope you'll indulge me. I'm a 27-year resident of Olivet, a real estate developer. My family has deep ties to this community. I may have mentioned in the past, my father was in the first graduating class of Ladue High School. My wife, both my daughters went to the Ladue school system, and my family and I have been heavily involved in this community for a number of years. And what I want to say before I get started also is that our team, and one of the reasons that they're all on the Zoom with us tonight is we are all in on this project. We are not merchant builders. We are not here to build something and leave, which I think can be demonstrated by my ownership of Price Crossing, which is the project immediately to the west that I built almost 16 years ago. We are here for the long haul. We are here for public-private partnership, and we're here to excel for everybody's benefit. And so when I first began the concept of Olive Crossing, there were a couple of key things that were important and crucial to this project. One, that the development was not just good for us as the developer, it had to be good for our entire community. The development needed to provide additional services, restaurants, and uses that our community has been seeking, and that many of my friends have been asking me for, in some cases for over a decade, and that the benefit needed to be greater than just for Olivet, because this project sits in between the airport and Clayton, right on the inner belt. It's a key landmark piece of property, which we feel deserves the right form of development. And so while changes and the challenges of assembling 12 pieces of property and dealing with the grading challenges and the pandemic and a number of issues have taken us a lot longer than we expected, we're seeing a lot of activity, and we've come up with what we think is the right plan. And, you know, cliche as it may be, third time is the charm in this case. This is our second amendment. This is our third version of the project, and we think this is the right one to move forward with. And that's because it's going to provide benefits to everybody. It's going to provide much needed revenues to our city. It's going to provide job. It's going to provide economic growth, and it's going to provide a myriad of uses, which now we, as we are requesting tonight, will include residential, which will supplement our retail by having people living on the site that can contribute to the economic growth of Olivet. And we believe that this benefit is again, multifolded, not just for us, it's for the city, it's for the overall community. And for background for the newer members of the TIF Commission, before I get to my presentation, I want to make sure you're aware, if I didn't mention it before, that the parcels that we're developing are roughly in the exact same condition they were in the mid to late 60s, so over 50 years ago, when Olivet first identified this area for redevelopment. And there are many physical challenges to this site. There are a lot of utility challenges, some of which I'll talk about in the PowerPoint, whether it's the power lines or the sewers. And the challenges in and of themselves, along with the complexity, I think is one of the reasons why the two prior TIF commissions both unanimously recommended approval of our request, because they see, and I hope you'll see when I show you the PowerPoint, just why this project makes so much sense. And the one thing I want to mention last thing I want to mention before I start, I probably say that a lot, is that what you're going to see in our renderings are all conceptual. You know, we haven't presented these to the city for formal approval. So the color, whether it's the color tones or the exact grading of the 3D is yet to be changed or yet to be resolved. And one of the things that's also yet to be resolved is, and I've heard a little bit about this, and I want the residents that are listening to understand that we have not eliminated the possibility of putting a grocer in this development. As a 27-year resident, I know it's what everybody wants, and I'm trying the best I can to make that happen. And so I've heard that there may be thoughts that we've eliminated that possibility. That is absolutely not the case. We're going to try to bring a grocer with the retailers, with the hotel, with the office, hopefully with the residential, to create a true live, work, play mixed use development. And so with that, we'll get to my PowerPoint. All right, can you all, everybody see the full screen, hopefully?
Yes.
Great, all right. So I wanted to run through sort of the evolution from the last request to this one. So this is the site plan from 2018. It had 7 buildings. It was roughly 180,000 square feet of building plus 1 parking garage. And it was heavily dependent on retail. And I think, as we all have seen with the pandemic, that might have been extremely problematic at the time, given what's happened. So this is our 2021 plan. And again, the exact lines may change and the footprints will move a little bit. But this 2021 site plan is now 6 buildings. It's now roughly 450,000 square feet of structure plus 2 parking garages. It's a true live, work, play development. It's in line with Olivet's strategic plan and the MU Gateway zoning in which this project lies. And it truly creates a dynamic sense of place with people working, people living, people staying in the hotel who could be family of residents of Olivet, as well as shoppers and diners. I think Mr. Spikerman mentioned earlier, in 2018, our rough estimate of the project was 70 to 73 million. I think I rounded to 75 on this slide. And currently, the new project, given the growth in size, has doubled to at least $150 million. And what we're doing is creating a sustainable mixed use development that's not reliant on any one sector of the economy, which we have seen in other areas has been detrimental given the pandemic. And we do have a very large emphasis on public space. And one of the things I've been really excited to work with the city about is this connection to the Centennial Greenway and what we'll have as far as a connection in front of our site where people can bike on and off, walk on and off, and get around our entire St. Louis region. And so our request tonight, and stop me at any time, I can't see all of you with the PowerPoint up, is the consent to add residential use to our TIF plan through an amendment. As Mr. Spikerman said, to increase our TIF amount to 23.2 million from the current 13.9 through amendment. And I thought this graph was important to show you is that over the evolution of this plan, the bar graph at the bottom shows the amount of TIF incentive in 2016 that we requested, in 2018, and currently. And the line shows the decreasing relative value of those tax increment financing dollars to our overall project cost. And what we've done by making this site more efficient and more vertical is we've decreased our reliance on this public-private partnership to only 15% of the entire project cost. And so I thought that was kind of important for us to mention that, you know, we're not just saying we want to rise all tides at the same level. We're actually decreasing what we need as part of our request. And so why are we adding multifamily residential at this time? One factor is market dynamics. We had considered building 2 office buildings. Given COVID, given the potential changes in that market, we do not believe that's the right way to go. New product. The last apartment complex to open for business in Olivet, and granted there's one under construction on the old City Hall, but the last one before that opened the year I graduated high school in 1986. And honestly, the stock is old, and many of the apartments in this town were built in the 50s and 60s. Olivet is predominantly a single family residential community, and that creates a high barrier to entry for people who want to live in the amazing city that I live in. And I think that more people should have that opportunity, and this makes that affordable if people don't have the money for a very large down payment, as housing prices have increased. One of the other factors is timing. If this request is approved, it gives us the ability to start the project now. Without that, we're still subject to waiting for the economy to recover until we can get office tenants and retail tenants to sign leases in the development, and that's starting to happen again. The interest levels peaking back up. But with residential, we are able to start now. I think I mentioned this earlier, strategic alignment. This is actually consistent with Olivet's zoning and the strategic plan. And as I mentioned earlier, it creates an efficient use mix. And I wanted to review some of the community benefits and some of the infrastructure costs the project will address. One is the project will, because of the growth in the physical buildings, it'll be more reliant on property tax, and property tax is more stable, it's more predictable, and less likely to fluctuate if there are any economic downturns going forward versus a heavily dependent sales tax project. One of the other things that may be counterintuitive, even though the project is growing in size, is that the traffic counts are actually declining due to the reduction in the intensity in the uses. And given that office traffic is at one peak time and the apartment traffic would be at another peak time. And just quickly to demonstrate that, I have an excerpt on the screen of an email I received from the senior traffic study specialist at MoDOT who has reviewed all of his data, and I highlighted in red so it's easy to see that even though the development is now proposing to utilize more square footage, it is being replaced with less intensive land uses. Therefore, the improvements described in our TIS, which is our traffic improvement study, and amendments are still valid, even given the growth in the square footage. And then as far as public investments that are required, so one of the things that we're doing both because we think it's the right thing and because it's the aesthetic thing to do and it makes the project actually feasible, is to bury 2 34,000 volt lines that run through the project that cross over Highway 170 and 1 4 kilovolt circuit. And that costs about $1.3 million. We've got almost 1.3 million, actually probably over 1.3 million in road improvements. We are widening Olive, almost a complete lane from the middle of Price Crossing, the center to the west, all the way to the Interbelt, as well as widening Price Road to create additional lanes so that it's not just a left or a straight. We've got more turning options to move traffic more efficiently. We've, as I mentioned earlier, coordinated with the Centennial Greenway. There's also a large storm channel that comes from the west that dumps onto this property that was done decades ago, and that needs to be encased and put underground. It took us about 3 years to work with the Corps of Engineers to get that approved, and we have a permit to do that. And one of, I'll call it the hidden gem benefits, is that by having this project at the point that it is and us having demolished the buildings, it made it easier for MSD to install 2 system relief lines, which are adding capacity to the sanitary system, preventing backups and contamination into their storm system. And those lines are actually installed now. One key historical piece I wanted to show is, this is a slide from Olivet's strategic plan. And you may have seen the words I used earlier in the presentation, dynamic sense of place, and that's what Olivet's looking for. And though the exact building configuration isn't the same as what we have, it's relatively similar. What you can see is this is what Olivet contemplated: a larger format, mid-rise development right on the highway, creating that economic growth and that opportunity that we are planning to bring. This is just a still shot from a few months ago. There have been a few color changes to some of the buildings to start you with. And then, if technology really works, hopefully what you see on your screen is a top-down map of our project. And this is a three-dimensional representation model that's in progress of being built. And I thought that I would give you a few of the views. I'm not going to go through all 29, just to give you a sense of what this is going to look like and what it might look like, should I say, in the future as we build. The grades still have to be attributed and a few other features, but this was as far as, oh, there's my mouse, as far as our design team could get it. So this is a view from Price Road looking into the development. Behind you would be Price Crossing, where Starbucks is. As you can see, the Olive is to the left. Oops, it's not as responsive, given I'm doing this remotely off a server. You've got the office building in the foreground, or the background, the apartment building, and the retail along the interior street to the left. And inside the development, as you can see, we're contemplating amply wide sidewalks on both sides of the street where available. We've got pedestrian crossings. This gives the apartment residents the ability to walk across the street to grab food. They could go over to Starbucks or Sugar Fire in Price Crossing. They can get onto the Centennial Greenway right up here on Olive, where my mouse is, go biking, walking, and connect throughout the entire community. See if this goes back as it should. There we go. Here, this is a view from the corner of Price and Olive. Oops. Come on. Should be loading, hopefully. Well. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is a shot from the corner of Olive and Price. And what I wanted to show from this is at least from our perspective, the sensible coordinated development that we have with the way that this project is laid out. One of the hidden benefits of the way that we're developing this site is to create physical building buffers along the southern boundary and along the western boundary that, as we found at Price Crossing when I built that building, actually block traffic noise from Olive and will, in this case, from the Interbelt to our neighbors to the west and south. If you will, sort of an added benefit. Back to the plan here showing, this as well. We will have a 1,700-foot continuous 8-foot tall buffer running from the corner of Price where the development starts all the way to the back corner. Again, as an additional mitigating factor that we've worked with the city on over the last couple of years. Again, to be a good neighbor, to protect the neighbors from any light or any sound. We've moved the buildings as much as we can as far away from the property line, in excess in many cases of the distance required under the underlying zoning. Okay, so in summary, project we believe is more stable and actionable now with the added residential use, which is in line with the strategic plan. The increased project size results in lower traffic counts. Our project investment doubles from 2018 to over 150 million. The requested increase, as I showed on the slide, is more efficient and lower of a percentage of funding than the prior requests. The cost benefit analysis you've all been provided, we believe, shows that this is a win-win-win for us, for the residents, and for all the taxing jurisdictions. And our goal is to create additional investment in our community by spurring that through economic growth. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Or I don't know if that's now or later.
I think we're going to postpone those questions for a little bit. My understanding is that we're going to now hear from Andy Struckoff on the cost benefit analysis. Mr. Struckoff, are you prepared to do that?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Andy Struckoff. I'm with PGAV, urban planning and economic development consulting firm here in St. Louis. We prepared the cost benefit analysis you all have been provided. I was going to walk through a little bit about that here this evening. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Okay. So start, first thing we did was the redevelopment plan, redevelopment project Greg just described. We estimated property values associated with the implementation of all the uses we talked about. There's retail uses, office and multifamily and hotel uses. Based on his construction schedule, which we talked with him about, assuming 100% completion of the project in 2024 and estimated market values of everything of roughly $103.6 million altogether. We also, so we estimate these property values, and then from these, we will estimate incremental property taxes. We also estimated taxable retail sales associated with various commercial spaces in the redevelopment project and the hotel, which are shown here in this table. Okay. And then we looked at the taxes generated for each jurisdiction impacted by the TIF redevelopment project, and revenues subject to capture by TIF, and then revenues paid to taxing jurisdictions that are not subject to capture by TIF. So in this table here, we see the estimated city revenues. This first column here, property taxes paid on the base amount up through 2035, at which point in time a portion of the city of Olivet's debt service levy will no longer be subject to capture by TIF. And so those property taxes get passed through to the city. Personal property taxes are not subject to capture by TIF. Bottom half, sales tax revenues from the city's local option, capital improvements, parks and sewer, and fire and emergency sales taxes collected by the city. Oops. And then revenues here to the city here. And compared with the no build scenario here, which shows property taxes paid on the base amount. And the differences here because this reflects, oops, a couple different property tax levies that do get captured by TIF here. And over here is the difference in payments and taxes to the city versus no build versus no build scenario. In this table here, we show estimated revenues to St. Louis County. Starting on the left side, we have the build scenario. We have all the county property tax and jurisdictions, taxes paid on the base amount, personal property, sales taxes, commercial surcharge revenues. These aren't subject to capture by TIF. And then here's our build scenario totals here. And then here's
Pardon my interruption. Is there a way for you to blow this up some more? It may be difficult for some of the residents to be able to read that.
Let me see. Let me just do this.
There we go. Thank you.
Certainly. Okay. So you see the difference here between the build scenario and the no build scenario. Here's the totals in the no build scenario here, totals in the build scenario, and then the difference here in this column. Next slide, we have estimated Ladue School District revenues. Revenues from property taxes on the base. Well, last year is a big jump up because incremental property taxes will not be collected on payments in the last yearly TIF. Personal property revenues, and commercial service revenues not captured by TIF, and here's the total build scenario, and then the no build scenario revenues here, and then here's our differences here in this column.
And I would just note on the school district, if the school district were to increase its levy, that increased amount would not be captured by TIF.
Here are for Metro Transit sales tax revenues. Here's half-cent sales tax not subject to capture by TIF. Quarter-cent sales tax also not subject to capture by TIF. Revenues will pass through to Metro Transit. No build scenario, no sales taxes being generated there now. We anticipate any in the future. So that's all new tax revenue for Metro. Great Rivers Greenway imposes sales taxes in St. Louis County. One portion is subject to capture by TIF. That's this 0.188%. This other portion is, this portion is not subject to capture by TIF. This 0.1% portion is subject to capture by TIF. And these show the differences there. Revenues in the build scenario. So this would be just the bottom half here for that sales tax. And here's a no build scenario, and here's showing new tax revenues to Great Rivers Greenway. State of Missouri, you get portion of property taxes from the blind pension fund, personal property revenues, portion of commercial surcharge revenues, and sales tax revenues, which aren't subject to capture by TIF. And so these will all be new revenues to the state. Compared to the build scenario, revenues just from the base, and there's the difference there. Make this one a little bigger. We've got in this table the community college and special school districts, property taxes, personal property, commercial surcharge, and totals here in the build scenario for community college. Again, personal property and commercial surcharge revenues not subject to capture by TIF. So those are new revenues. Compared to the no build scenario, it's property taxes paid on the base amount. Same here for the special school district. Looking at new personal property values and revenues of commercial surcharge revenues, and the difference here. And here, this table, we have the Zoo Museum District and MSD. Again, these are also both just property taxing districts. Metropolitan Zoo Museum District property tax levy, build scenario here, no build scenario here. Again, additional revenues from personal property investment and commercial surcharge revenues. And the no build scenario, we don't get those revenues. Same for MSD here. In each case, you can see the differences being positive for each jurisdiction. In this table, we have our UCD Storm Sewer District and the Development Disability Districts, also property taxing districts. Just you see here. So these personal property revenues, this district doesn't get any commercial surcharge revenues, that isn't shown. And here we see the differences. There's not really much of an increase here for the storm sewer. For development disability, you get some commercial surcharge revenue and personal property revenue, and that drives much of the difference here between these two things. Also, this tax levy not subject to capture by TIF. So these add up to estimated TIF revenues. So estimated pilots here, assuming the imposition of a community improvement district with additional 1 cent sales tax here, and incremental sales taxes captured by TIF. Then here we have our estimated total revenues for the project here. Over the term, total up to $44.9 million roughly. In the build summary, there's taxes paid. So this totals up all the numbers as went through taxes paid to each jurisdiction, property taxes, personal property taxes, and sales tax revenues. totaling up roughly $31.2 million. Both of those tables reflect the build scenario if the project is built as described. The no build scenario, if nothing happens, nothing changes, no TIF. That's assuming taxes paid on the base amount into the future. And that is the cost benefit analysis, and I'll be around for any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Struckhoff. Appreciate your time. What we're now going to do is receive written and oral comments from the public and from the taxing jurisdictions. We have received a number of written comments from the public, and I thought that it would be most efficient for us to begin with the oral comments, with the caveat that if a resident chooses to speak and present their views on this project orally, we are going to then not read your written comment during the proceedings. They'll still be received into the record, but for the sake of efficiency, if a resident has submitted both written and intends to submit an oral comment, we're going to allow the oral comment to be heard tonight, and the written comment will just be received into the record. So with that, I'd like to begin with the receipt of oral comments from the public. A couple rules before we get started. Number one, please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you go over 3 minutes, we're going to identify that and ultimately ask you to please wrap up. So for the respect of everyone and their time, please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Number two, if someone shares the same sentiment that you intended to, please consider putting your hand back down and not sharing that sentiment and standing on the comments of your fellow community members. Just again, in the interest of keeping this moving along at as brisk a pace as possible. If you do wish to speak, please raise your hands. There's an option within Zoom that allows you to do that at the very bottom of the screen. Ms. Sondag will recognize that and at the appropriate time promote you to a panelist that will allow you to speak and be seen and heard by everyone. I'd ask that when you do that, please be sure that your microphone is turned on. And also, please, to the extent possible, have your video camera on if you have one. It makes for a more productive experience if we can see and hear you. And once you're finished speaking, you'll be demoted back to an observer rather than a panel member. So with that said, Ms. Sondag, do we have any hands raised at the moment?
Mr. Chairman, before that
Yes,
starts,
please.
may I ask, during our EDC commission meetings, if we have public comment, we normally ask if the resident would identify themselves at least by name, address if they would, but at the very least tonight, could we ask them to at least identify themselves as a resident of Olivet or not?
Yes, you reminded me of the one rule I forgot to give, which is when you are promoted to a panelist, please identify yourself, name and address. If for some reason you're uncomfortable giving your address, at least please identify whether you're a resident of Olivet or not. Thanks, Mr. Springer, for that.
Okay, William Hanson has his hand up, and I'm going to promote, Bill, I'm going to promote you to panelist, so you should be coming over.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Hello, Bill Hanson. I am a resident of Olivet and I live at 817 North Price Road. First, I would like to thank Mr. Yarwitz and his partners for attempting to develop on a property that is clearly difficult to work with. And I agree that Olivet must have development to continue to be a great community. I think the retail and the restaurants are going to help continue to make Olivet a walkable community. My concern is, has the appropriate impact analysis been completed on the community? Traffic, additional services, etc. If 3 apartment developments occur in a close area beyond the taxes, which obviously is being done for the cost analysis. This clearly isn't the developer's responsibility, but this is something that the TIF Commission and the city overall should be doing to make sure that we're making the right decisions for Olivet before we make any TIF decisions. Thank you.
And Mr. Hanson, if I may, your question specifically relates to whether there's been a traffic study performed on this new development?
More than that, and I've been on several meetings, and Mr. Yarwitz and I'll say others, but I know that he has, has talked about traffic. It's, the overall, not just a development, because I think there are very good parts of this development that need to occur. Although like lots of people, I'd love to have a grocery store. There's now talk of an apartment complex behind Chevy's and CVS. There is the old City Hall. And I'm not against any of those. I'm just, who is looking at that bigger picture of what's best for all of that beyond each of these developments? And are we making the right decision? I think on their own, they all have merit.
Well, I'll speak for a brief moment on that and then pass it off to Mr. Yawitz to give the better answer. But I am a member of the Planning and Community Design Commission also in Olivet. And I can say that we as a group look at that at a global level and are paying attention to traffic patterns and things of that nature. So at least from that perspective, there's a commission within Olivet that takes a more global look at those developments. But Mr. Yawitz, do you want to comment on that in particular?
Well, as it relates to traffic, as I pulled up on the slides during my presentation, though it may seem counterintuitive, the traffic volumes and the peak counts now as a result of the change in uses are less than what we have currently approved and for which the improvements that we are building were designed to handle. As a result, again, of that change in intensity. A drive-through restaurant, of which I think we had 3 at the original plan, and now we're down to maybe 1, creates a much bigger traffic impact than apartments. If you think about it in the case of your house, you usually leave in the morning and you come back in the afternoon, in the evening, versus constant in and out from what at the time was 90,000 feet of retail space. We'll still have ample retail space, but I'm happy to give the city the emails from MoDOT that confirm that our traffic counts actually are going to be less than we thought, even given the changes.
Okay, Ms. Sondag, any other comments from the public?
Okay, I'm gonna send Bill back hopefully and only.
Mr. Hanson, thank you.
You have trouble with this sometimes, so. Thank you. Right. Okay, there's another hand up. Let me find it, and it's Mark Minton. Mark, I'm getting ready to bring you over, promote you to panelist.
Mr. Minton, good evening.
Good evening.
If you wouldn't mind starting, just obviously state your name and then let us know your address, please.
Sure. My name's Mark Minton. I live at 115 Stoneleigh Towers, and I've been very involved in every aspect of this project as it started from being presented as a community development for the community that has grown in size and scale to where it is now, which is a very, very dense development compared to the original iterations that gained public approval. So much like the speech that Greg gave tonight, that's been the experience, right? And so first thing I'd want to point out is with the presentation, we heard a lot of build and no build. This is not a build, no build conversation. This is changing the plans. And so I think that this whole conversation really skews what you guys are responsible for even talking about tonight. I really echo a lot of what Bill had to say. I think that the council should be looking more at a overall what's going on in that area. You know, it's not just Olivet. U-City has a very, very large development happening as well. And we have to work together. Otherwise, we're just going to end up, the community is going to foot a large bill for CID and sales tax improvements. And all we're going to get is traffic. It's going to change the community drastically. By having 3 5-story apartment buildings that Olivet's trying to put through, you're potentially increasing the population of our community by about 10%. And that's not even taking into account the apartment buildings that U-City wants to do on our border and Creve Coeur also wants to do on our other border. So I think that Nicole Galloway, our state auditor, she put out a great piece today in our Missouri Times. And I would encourage all of you voting in this TIF commission to review that and take it seriously, because she points out a lot of the problems that we have when we create a CID to change the rules of the community. You know, when I bought my house, the rules stated that Olivet was allowed to build a 45-foot commercial building behind my property. Well, now I'm faced with a 5-story hotel building. And sure, Greg, I'm probably not going to hear the traffic, but I'm going to have 5 stories of people looking in my backyard. I mean, it's the 2006 presentation, the sense of place that you were trying to promote that you're following. Those buildings were against the highway, not against the residences that you're stacking your commercial development against. So it couldn't be further from the truth. The density that you're doing is not in line with what was illustrated from how I read that document. And I think that it's irresponsible for us to continue to do that when something like a change in retail usage and COVID for a short window of time can allow you to do whatever you want and change the rules and have the community double their investment in your project. I'm very much against the additional TIF funding. I'm very much pro-development in Olivet. I think we need good, sensible development, but I think this is a bit over the top, and I think it would shock a lot of members of the community if they understood how many new 5-story buildings are coming. When drive through Olivet, there's plenty of vacancy signs, whether it be for residents or for office buildings. You know, I worry that we make a big investment in something for hopes that it pays off 20 years down the road after the TIF's funded. That's a great goal, but the real winners right now are the developers. And the TIF Commission is tasked with looking out for the well-being, the financial well-being of the public that it represents. So we hope that you take the word of the community seriously, put some serious thought into this, and let's get some good development. That's all I have for you.
Mr. Minton, thank you for your comments. We appreciate them. Ms. Sondag, anyone else?
I don't see any more hands.
Okay. We'll just pause for a moment. Anyone else who is participating in the Zoom, if you're a member of the public and have an interest in being heard on this, now's your opportunity. So please take the opportunity to raise your hand and provide those comments. We'll just rest for a moment.
We have one more hand. It's either Suzanne or Stephen. I'll be bringing you over. Or it might be both, I don't know. Okay, we can see
Barb, I
you.
see a comment in the Q&A that says Carol Wagner would like to say something.
Okay. And she has her hand up as well. Thank you. Yeah, and I'll monitor the Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss, just so you're aware, you're on mute. There should be a button in the lower left-hand corner where you can toggle that.
I got it. Thank you. So yes, thank you for your time here. My name is Steve Weiss. I'm a resident of Olivet. And for expediency, I don't want to reiterate everything that Mr. Minton just suggested, but I do agree wholeheartedly. And I guess there are some things that I don't quite understand. So I can't convey all my concerns if I'm not fully understanding based on some things I've heard this evening. So I would suggest, again, looking at this in terms of the livable nature of all these changes. So if we're increasing the population overall significantly, what does that do to resources like fire department, police, schools, that sort of thing? And are we factoring in the development in U City beyond just Olivet? I also do wonder what overall, I guess my understanding was about the grocery store versus these apartments, and it doesn't sound like it's that. So that's part of why, that's an example of why I can't fully comment here, but I do think a grocery store is very much needed. There isn't one in Olivet. And so if it's not that versus apartments, I guess I can't fully speak to that, but I would like to understand if there's still that effort, what are the chances? What are the hurdles here? So I don't know if I have too much more to comment because I couldn't see all the presentation. And it sounds like some of my understanding may not be fully informed, frankly. But those are my concerns. Again, also echoing Mr. Minton's. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. I'll note that the Olivet website has information about this project on it. And Ms. Sondag, unless there's some objection, I assume these materials are going to be posted there for Mr. Weiss and other members of the community to access them after the meeting.
Sorry, yes.
Great. Mr. Weiss, thank you for your time and comments. We appreciate it.
Oh, sorry. Getting that timing is hard.
Did I hear that Ms.
Carol
Wagner?
Yeah, Carol, I'm going to be bringing you over.
And Carol, you're muted and we can't see you, just so you're aware.
Okay, you are unmuted now, and we can hear you. And then we can see.
Okay. So I am my name is Carol Levinson Wagoner. I am a longstanding resident of Olivet, grew up here, ended up buying my first house here, and it's probably gonna be my only house. So I've lived here the majority of my life. I am strongly an advocate of Greg's proposal for adding some residential to this project. I am also serving on the Olivet Planning Commission. And ever since we first began talking about a project, we didn't know whose it was going to be or how it was going to evolve. But we have always considered this would be a mixed use and a more intensive type of development than we had anyplace else in Olivet, because it is adjacent to the interchange and it's a very appropriate place for more intensive development. I don't think that we're talking about, a huge high rise. We are talking about something that is going to be more intense than Olivet has seen before. And that is certainly what I think we're looking for. And that's what I'm looking for just as a citizen of Olivet. I very much would like a grocery store, and I'm hoping, and I'm sure Greg is too, that he is able to get one to this development. I'm also keenly aware that our economy, like it or not, has changed drastically in just a very short time. And so what we conceived of and what the developer conceived of as viable uses before the pandemic has changed dramatically, whether we like it or not. And I would say that at this point, I am a strong advocate of adding to the diversity of the project. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm now muted. Thank you very much for your time and comments, Ms. Wagner. We appreciate them as always. Ms. Sondag, I'll note there is an open question in the question and answer area. Would it be appropriate for me to read that question? Or how would you like to address that? Apart from that, I think, sorry, I'm going to answer my own question. Mary, I don't know if you're able to raise your hand, but if you have the ability to speak live, we would welcome your comments.
I'm happy to bring Mary over too. I do see her here. Oh, she has her hand up, so I'm going to bring her over.
There we go. Great, thank you. And Mary, you're on mute and your video is off, just so you know.
Okay. Hello?
Hello, and are you actually James and not Mary?
Yes, I'm James. I'm the husband, sorry.
James, would you mind introducing yourself, provide your address, and then share your comments with us?
Yes, I'm James Fields, and we live at 1120 Hilltop Drive. And the question that I was posing, kind of like with the other two guys, Bill, and I stay on Olivet, and on the industrial park right behind us. When Enterprise moved in a few years ago, lots of traffic. Like I could barely get in and out. I'm a chef, I work normally nights, trying to get in and out of my driveway just to turn on Hilltop to get to Olive, to get to the highway. 15, 20, minutes. Like the line is literally backed up all the way up to Alice, which is the cross street off of Hilltop. So if I went the other way, drove the other way to down Hilltop to Alice to go to Price, that would be backed up also. So like, and this is just from like the volume that Enterprise would have, just from the employees. And since the pandemic, yeah, there hasn't been a lot of people there, but I would assume that they will, continue business there and, bring back a lot of their employees. And, with this new development, that's coming up on, behind us, behind Chevy's, with all these people, it's like, it really slows the street down as it is, just the amount of traffic that's here now. It would be pretty much almost impossible to get out the way the light cycles, so like during peak traffic, even going, even time to come down east on Olive, like say if I go to Walgreens and pick up my medicine and, not go the back way down the Dillman Industrial and just come back down Olive, it like takes forever because traffic is literally from 170 and Olive, past Dillman, and the thing of it is that, yeah, that the other lane, I can understand like adding that in and, trying to make for that, but like how much is an extra lane really going to add in? I'm not a problem with developing and, making opportunities for people to come live in Olivet because I moved here a long time ago and I thought it was a great city and I even left and came back here. So I really like being here. But the thing of it is like the functionality of the streets and how it works currently now, how are we going to get past that with the real cognitive study to really get in detail how we're going to manage all this traffic and like the on and off on the highway and stuff like that. And that's the end of my question.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. Mr. Yawitz, I don't know if that's something that you want to comment on, but you're welcome to.
Sure. I mean, I can just take a stab at it and acknowledge that one, yes, on the north side of Olive, given the buildings that are there can be congestion. And tell you that we're doing what we can and more in that. For example, we are adding a turn lane on eastbound Price from the middle of Price Crossing to Price Road. And why I mention that is that actually has nothing to do with our new development. That was something that we negotiated in collaboration with the Department of Transportation to add an extra improvement to help try to get traffic moving smoother and faster. One of the things you may notice in our development plan is that there's a depression along Olive in front of our development where a bus can pull out of main traffic. Why that's important is that the 91 route stops 5 times through and around rush hour every day. And when the world goes back on and everybody's dealing with traffic, that bus in itself creates traffic. By having that depressed area where the bus can pull out and stop, traffic can keep moving. So we've spent the better part of 3 years designing these road improvements with MoDOT. As the city manager knows, we had a Zoom call with about 24 different entities, the city, Great Rivers Greenway, MoDOT, and the developer of the project on the east side of 170 to talk about how we might make this better for everyone and work together. We don't have a resolution to that yet. I haven't seen a potential solution, but I did want to mention when people are concerned about greater developments, know that MoDOT cares about that and then puts that back on developers like me. But I appreciate your concern.
Okay, Mr. Fields, thank you very much for your comment and time. We appreciate it, genuinely.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Rob Connors has his hand up, and I'm gonna be bringing you over. Uh-oh. And I'll ask you to unmute.
Can you hear me, Barbara?
Yes, now I can. Thank you.
Great. I'm having trouble figuring out how to put the video on, but maybe I'll just go ahead and talk and you guys will get the benefit of not having to look at me. But thanks for having me on. I really wanted to say a few words really in support of the project. I know it's been going on for a while, planning for a while. And first of all, Rob Connors, 3 Heather Hill Lane. I believe that this is so important to our community. I think it just does so many things for us. It really pulls us together. And I love the fact that it's this diverse mix of uses. I know there's been some changes with the apartments being added in. And I know that at first glance, that's tough to kind of get your arms around, but I actually believe it provides a great alternative for housing and all of that. You know, I was talking to some friends of mine the other night who came to Olivet originally living in an apartment. They moved to the apartments across the street from Olive over there near Old Bonham. And then they later moved to a house. And they were telling me how when their kids went off to college, they were thinking about moving back into an apartment if they could find one that suited their lifestyle today, which probably wasn't the one they moved into originally, several years ago. But having that just provides another alternative. I also think that this development that Greg Yowitz has put together is in the perfect location. I mean, I don't think you could pick a better place to be where you can get on and off the highway so quickly with so many things to do. We can eat there, shop there. The hotel is another great amenity. I have friends and family that come from out of town. I hate putting them up in Clayton. I think it's so much better to have it there. I think there's just so many benefits to this that'll really help Olivet stay a real focal point of this near community, that it's imperative that we get it done. And just lastly, and maybe I need clarification on this, but it looks to me like the TIF has been declining. And I think that that's a good thing. So I kind of leave it at that. Maybe you can clarify if I'm reading that right, but I appreciate the opportunity to say that today. And again, I'll just close with, I really do think this project is very important to Olivet and our entire community to remain that focal point and be the center of it all.
Thank you, Mr. Connors. We appreciate that. Mr. Yowitz, I don't know if you want to comment on that change in the TIF amounts. Seems like Mr. Connors had a question about that.
Yes, so as I showed on the slide, while the dollar amounts of the TIF are increasing, the percentage of those dollars relative to our investment, to the investment that Rusty and Jason and I are making, is declining from the original 2016 request to now, from 26% of our project cost now down to 15%. So it sort of goes in both directions. Dollars go up, but percentage of investment relative to the size of the project goes down precipitously. So it's sort of a yes and answer.
Okay, Mr. Connors, thanks very much for your comment again. Barbara, anyone else with their hand raised?
I don't see anyone right now.
Okay, I'll note there's another comment from a Leslie Rickard in the question and answer period. She indicates she needed to leave. I'll just read this one. I wanted to put into the record that while I'm happy with the development, I'm also concerned about the density. Also, has Greg Yowitz considered a global food store, since we're losing lots of mom and pop restaurants, stores east of 170 on Olive? Thank you. Ms. Rickard, thanks very much for your comment. Mr. Yowitz, I don't know if you want to comment on that one question that was posed.
I think I'll just say what I said earlier, which is we are committed to do everything we can to try and get a grocer. The economy has changed. In fact, the one that we thought would be here when we started this project back in 2015 has since gone out of business nationwide. So there are factors in the market that we can try and have influence on, and then there are global factors that affect things like that. So we are doing our best to bring a grocer. It will certainly, it is something we have a key focus on doing. But as to which grocer it might be and if it's going to happen, I can't predict the future. But trust me, I know someone who lives in my house that constantly asks me about this, about whether she's getting a grocer back into Olivet.
Ms. Sondag, anyone else with their hand raised?
Not that I see.
We'll just give it 10
There,
seconds.
Mr. Hanson has raised his hand again.
Okay. Let's promote him for just one more. minute.
Actually, there is also someone who hasn't spoken yet. Would you like me to take them first?
Let's take them first. Yes, please.
We had talked about that before. I wasn't when we were talking about the process. So. Utica, will you have you on? And if you just want to unmute.
Hi, my name is Utica Morris. And just quick question, has there been consideration? I feel like paid community members are just a little more vested than transient residents. Has there been consideration made to making that property condominium instead of apartment?
Greg, do you want to comment on that?
We have not considered turning this into a condominium building. That's a different economic structure. So no, and I think one of the things I also want to point out, and I've seen some chatter online about this. So tenants or apartments, in their rent is a portion of what we pay as owners for the property tax, much like at Price Crossing. My office tenants do not pay property taxes directly. They pay them through me. It's the exact same way that it's done in an apartment building. And so I've seen some concern online about the fact that apartments are tax-free. Apartments are not tax-free. We as the owners of that building will pay a very substantial property tax bill for that building and for the associated parking garage.
Okay, Ms. Morris, thanks very much for your comment and your question. We appreciate it.
And then, and I apologize, it is not Mr. Hanson, but Mrs. Hanson who has her hand up.
Okay.
About that. Sorry, Christina. And you're over now.
Same tropical environment, different person. How are you, Ms. Hanson? Would you mind just stating your name and address just for the
Yes.
record?
This is Christina Hanson. I live on North Price Road. I would like to talk to the commission about the focus of the residents. I am very excited about a potential development within 3 blocks of us that I could walk to for hopefully groceries, also restaurants. However, I think that the commission needs to take into account the residents of Olivet as a higher priority than the developer and those of us directly impacted by it, not just financially by the developer. I understand the developer wants to put a great deal of money into Olivet, and I appreciate that. I know he's a resident. He did Price Crossing. I appreciate all of that. However, some of the issues that have been brought up previously by residents regarding traffic on Price Road and him not being willing to have right turn only out of the development so they do not turn left onto Price Road and create more traffic jams than what is already at Price Crossing, and people automatically assuming you're going to turn one way or the other coming up and down Price Road when they're trying to get out of Price Crossing. So I would ask that the commission take into account the residents' voices, not only the developer who is also a resident, but the residents who have direct concerns and impacts by the area of the development. Again, I am not against the development. I am excited about a development. I am just like other residents have addressed tonight. I am concerned about the changes that have occurred. It is now a higher focus on the developer rather than the residents and what may benefit the residents of Olivet. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hanson. We appreciate your comments and time. Ms. Sondag, anyone else?
One moment, I just need to move over. Do not see any other hands,
Okay.
but I have said that before.
Yes, well, why don't we then move on to the next step in this process, which is the receipt of oral comments from the taxing jurisdictions. Would anyone like to speak on behalf of a taxing jurisdiction?
I believe Mr. Trejo is interested in speaking.
Okay, Mr.
And
Trejo.
I would be also interested. Thank you. And before that starts, Keisha also has her hand up. I want it to be noted.
Ms. Lee, yes, ma'am.
Yes, my name is Keisha Lee, and I am one of the two commissioners representing the Ladue School District. And we would like to request that the TIF Commission not vote on the amended Gateway I-170 redevelopment plan on tonight. The state statute requires the TIF Commission to vote within 30 days of the public hearing, and voting on day 0 poses meaningful issues for the school district. Instead, we are asking that the vote be taken after April 12th. Like all of the commission members, we were appointed to represent one of the taxing entities that are impacted by the TIF. Consistent with our normal process, we reviewed the information on the TIF as an information item at our March 8th school board meeting. We indicated that at our April 12th meeting, we would summarize what took place at tonight's public hearing, update our financial analysis, and hear comments from our constituents. Andy and I will consider all this in deciding how to cast our 2 TIF Commission votes. If the TIF Commission requires us to vote tonight, it poses a number of untenable issues for us that will cause us to abstain from voting. 1, having the TIF Commission vote immediately after the public hearing precludes our school board members' ability to consider what took place at the public hearing and in turn reflect that in their input on how the school district representatives will cast their TIF Commission votes. And 2, hearing the TIF Commission vote immediately after the public hearing precludes our community members' ability to consider what took place at the public hearing, and in turn reflect that in their input on how school district representatives will cast their TIF Commission votes. This also poses a transparency issue that is unacceptable to the school board and our community. Of all the taxing entities involved in this project, the Ladue School District is subject to the most impact from the TIF, both because we forego the most tax revenue during the tax mitigation period, and also because we are subject to considerable out-of-pocket costs in educating the children residing in the proposed apartments, without meaningful tax revenue to help defray those costs. Based on the city's projections, this would go on through 2039. Given the substantial impact that this project would have on our school district, we think it's reasonable that we have sufficient time to go through our normal transparent review process. We therefore ask that you schedule the TIF Commission vote after April 12th. Thank you very much for your consideration of our requests.
Well, thank you, Ms. Lee. We were in receipt of a written request similar to the one you just articulated. And I share your view that the Ladue School District should have an opportunity to review these materials. I'm not sure if now is the right time to decide this, but my proposal was going to be that we hold off on a vote until April 13th to allow the school district time to meet and confer on this issue. One caveat to that is I'd like to make sure that we are still able to take that vote on April 13th. So I guess we'll just take this moment to ask that question. Is there anyone on the commission who would not be available at 6 p.m., for example, on April 13th to cast their vote on this issue?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Springer.
Yeah, I think I should be available on that date for vote, and I am not going to object if the commission in general feels it worthwhile to postpone it. But Ms. Lee brought up some points, and maybe for better understanding on my part, I would just kind of ask a few things that came to my mind here. I mean, each representative that's been on this commission has been given the authority to vote based on either their expertise, their general knowledge, their ability to take in information and make a decision. And in past TIF meetings, the school board has done just that, sat through presentations, absorbed information, and made a decision. We've heard public comments, I don't think I've heard anything new from previous meetings. And we've all had the financial documents for roughly 4 weeks. So, and my understanding is that I sat in on at least one meeting with school board members and the developer, and my understanding was they've had at least a second meeting. So I think, comments or questions that they've had up until today have certainly been discussed. And I've never been told how to vote by any member of my commission or the city council or other commissions in the city. And I've never been asked how I was going to vote. So, again, I'm not objecting to postponing it. We haven't heard any new financial information. And I guess I'm having a little bit of a tough time. We've been asked to make this decision. That's why we accepted the seat with the power to make that decision. I'm just not really sure what the hang up is.
I'd like to.
Again, I'm not objecting to the postponement. I just don't understand.
I'd be happy to, and Keisha may want to come and shed some light on that, Mr. Springer. First of all, what we want to do is to understand the perspective of the 5 other school board members, as well as the people in our community. And I respect that the 3 representatives in Olivet may have a different process, and that's fine. But in our school district, we want to incorporate that. I will also say, when we compare this to the first, the original plan and the First Amendment, this is much more impactful for the school district, not only because of considerably more abated taxes during the period through 2039 as it's been projected, but also because this is something that would entail our having costs to educate the children that might reside in the apartment, who we welcome, of course, but at the same time, there would be a protracted period where we would be educating those children without the normal tax revenue to defray the cost. So we want to have an open mind on this. We want to make an informed decision, and part of that informed decision is our school board and our community giving us input. And then just like you, Mr. Springer, then Ms. Lee and I will vote our votes on what we think is in the interest of our constituents.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
appreciate
Besler.
that. And again, that thought process has been out there. The information about potential residents certainly has been on the table for many, many weeks. We're, again, not going to be argumentative. I'm just having a hard time figuring it out. And that's all information that's been out there for many, many, many weeks. And I'm not objecting to postponing it. I'm having a problem with the logic when we all sit in the same seats and theoretically have all the same powers and abilities to make decisions. And I'll stop at that. I understand what you and Ms. Lee are bringing up.
Mr. McKenna has his hand up. Yes, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to note, April 13th is a Tuesday evening, so the St. Louis County Council meets on Tuesday evening, so there will be a meeting that evening at 6:30. So depending on how long you expect that meeting to go, our meeting that is, I for one would not be able to attend. I also think that might put some residents in a tough position of trying to pick between 2 public bodies making important decisions that impact them. So just for the record, consider that. And just really quickly, I do want to note, or I want to clarify, you mentioned earlier, Mr. Chair, about providing these materials that we're considering tonight on the website.
Yes.
If that has not already been the case, if that's not already been on the website, then I think that would go against what Mr. Springer's implying, that everybody has had 4 weeks to review this material. While I understand that we as the members of this commission have had that to consider, if the public has not had ample time to review those materials, that is a concern for me personally. So I just would like to clarify, maybe it has been out on the website this whole time, and that's great. I just would like to note for the record what is going on there.
So yeah, let me take those 2 points in order. Number one, my intention would be for this vote to happen quite expeditiously on the 13th. So I can't imagine we'd be in a situation where those 2 public forums would conflict with one another. I think this would wrap up. My hope is within 10, 15 minutes, something like that. But I appreciate you bringing that potential conflict to my attention. And then second point, Ms. Sondag, I don't know if you can comment on that. Perhaps I was just fat-lipped in suggesting that perhaps it wasn't available.
It has been posted. The draft plan, it was at the first meeting and has been up on the website, as well as the financial, the CBA was put up on the website same day, probably a day or so before you folks got it.
Thank you, Ms. Sondag. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I guess as a result of this conversation and hearing no objections, my proposal, my course of proceeding, I suppose I should say, is that we would conduct that vote on the 13th at 6:00 p.m. And with that, I think perhaps we can move on to receiving oral comments from the taxing jurisdictions. Mr. Trejo, I think you were going to make a comment.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. My name is Carlos Trejo. I am the Director of Planning and Community Development for the City of Olivet, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the Commission tonight. My role is, again, as a planner, is to further the city's comprehensive plan. A fundamental goal of our 2006 comprehensive plan is to develop the Olive Boulevard corridor reflective of the community's vision of fostering a dynamic sense of place. Dynamic sense of place is kind of a rallying cry that we generated back in 2004 as we were putting the plan together based on the community input. And since then, actively with our city's plan commission, we've been trying to instill that term dynamic sense of place in our reviews, in our newsletters, in our discussions with developers and the community as a whole. So we take that vision seriously. The dynamic sense of place vision includes developing mixed use, coordinated developments that provide a sense of identity and scale. And it emphasizes, the plan emphasizes that to succeed, the city has to proactively engage with the development community to accomplish this vision, and which we do and which we are here today. In 2016, the city issued a request for proposals for the redevelopment of the 14 acres along the southwest corner of Olive Boulevard and I-170, the area that we are discussing today. Within that RFP, kind of quoting, a primary goal of redevelopment for the project area is to create an eastern gateway into the city to lead progress along Olive Boulevard and act as a catalyst for future development in Olivet. So again, as we've had these discussions, we didn't see this site singularly or as by itself, but how holistically it could help enhance the corridor for our community, our neighbors, and the region as a whole. In doing so, we created a mixed-use zoning district that was called the MU Gateway District. And the sole purpose of this Gateway District, its goals were to promote medium density development of 2 stories or more, to develop corporate offices, campuses, and services, and to develop housing and lodging services. Emphasis was set within the MU district to limit retail from dominating or anchoring a development. This is the city of Olivet. We're a fully built out community for the exception of these 14 acres before you tonight. So capitalizing on these 14 acres and focusing on retail and the expanse parking that it takes to facilitate retail was just not in the city's best interest. It also focused on emphasizing the maximizing development density, which we hope we've done successfully as we've gone through these iterations. As the city's planner, it's both my professional and moral obligation to ensure that development realizes its full potential and sets a bar of expectation for the city and the region as a whole. This is the 3rd iteration of this development. We started off with a FAR, floor area ratio, which is a metric commonly used in zoning, but helps give us a guide in terms of how effectively we're using a site or its density, especially in non-residential uses. We started off with 0.12, or roughly about 77,000 square feet. Second iteration, we worked with the developer and increased that density to a 0.53 to roughly 340,000 square feet. Today, that density or floor area ratio is to 0.88, or roughly over 500,000 square feet. to accommodate and to understand and be sensitive to that square footage. Working with the developer, the mixture of uses is essential and important. Today's development does two things. One, it capitalizes on the limited land area that we have here in Olivet. And two, with the mixture of land uses, it provides a balance and unique balances to be sensitive to that density, and it stays consistent with our unique qualities of Olivet and the Olive Boulevard corridor. Again, this development is consistent with the city's goal and with the city's comprehensive plan and furthers our vision of dynamic central place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trejo. We appreciate it, and we do appreciate all the time and effort you put into this project. It doesn't go unnoticed. Ms. Sondag, I believe you mentioned earlier that you perhaps wanted to say something. Is that the case, or did I misunderstand you?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. And thanks everyone for being here tonight. I think that most of you folks have heard and have just heard again that there's a lot of history within this 14 acres. In 1969, the city of Olivet identified it as a prime commercial engine. The goal of redevelopment persisted through the years until 2016, when a developer was chosen to redevelop this area. The original TIF plan was approved in 2017, and then again in 2019 after it's changed. And this amendment does increase the density and the diversity of this development while decreasing the percentage of TIF. He's back to ask for an additional use, multifamily housing. And as stated by our Planning Community Development Director, Carlos Trejo, this addition to the development is in line with the city's vision. The amendment, in fact, it was in line with the actual RFP that went out in 2014. This is a complex project with a lot of hurdles that are site specific. The shape of the 14 acres, the boomerang shape, the number of parcels that had to be assembled, the high voltage power lines running through the center, and the possible environmental issues from prior uses that stood on that property. And then there are a lot of outside forces. The changing retail scene, the traffic about the area, and of course, then the pandemic. And I don't believe the pandemic is a point in time. I don't believe we know the extent of what our world will look like when it's done. I do believe that the developer and his team have prepared to meet the site-specific challenges, and I think you saw that. And I do believe that this additional use will help the development be more resilient to some of those outside forces. I think it's a good development with a long-term investment for Olivet and for the taxing districts. I think there is a difference between what the vision of a taxing district and that of a homeowner. We play the slow game. We do comprehensive plans that last 15 to 20 years because we know it takes a long time. We are used to preparing and planning for changes that come about. We do think about how will this impact our emergency services. We do look at what will be any additional costs, if any, in those. We do look at the traffic, and we look at the traffic in the various areas. Olivet has traffic issues, and those traffic issues are structural. We have a lot of cul-de-sacs. Olive is our main drag, and we rely on MoDOT to assist us in understanding how much traffic it can handle. We have had much more traffic on Olivet prior to the redevelopment of Page. We had a lot more traffic on Olive Boulevard. We have had a higher population than we currently have by about 2,000 people. So we've seen some decline. When I came here, there were a number of vacant parcels all along Olive. And slowly we've been working to try to change that. We have been looking, we've been working with CBB Traffic Engineering, who was used by Greg Yowitz, who's been used by Novus. We did an Olive master conceptual plan with Lockmuller. Our current work with CBB is to try to figure out how do we improve the traffic? And it's going to be, one is to define the problem. Is it a time of day? Is it an overall thing? Or is it an overall thing? Is there just too much traffic? We continue to get the same information from the traffic engineers that we are not at capacity. Now, we won't be at capacity with these or with the other developments. Now, that doesn't mean, particularly in that Hilltop area, that area north of this development, that we don't look at how we can improve it, because they have specific structural problems there with very few, with not a lot of egress. And we're working to address that. So we do take into consideration the issues. We do take into consideration the finances. And I think that this project has changed, and I feel the frustration that change can cause when things change and you think you agree and then you don't. But I think in the long term, both in the strategic plan that was done, in the catalyst strategy that was done in 2016, they have continued to identify this area as the area where we can have development. We don't have a lot of other areas to take down and to put something in. And so I hope that you, and I know that you will, you've studied the materials, you'll look at the implications, and you'll make the best decision. And again, I thank you for being here.
Ms. Sundbeck, thanks very much. Are there any other oral comments from the taxing jurisdictions at this time? No. Okay, then the next item, two items on our agenda for this evening are receiving written comments, both from the public and from the taxing jurisdictions. Although this may seem a bit daunting, I thought it appropriate for the secretary to read the written comments into the record. Number one, so the commission members can hear it, but also so that the members of the public that are participating have the benefit of hearing those materials as well. So if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Carl, as the secretary, reading through those written comments that we received from members of the public, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of process items. One, I will pause after each letter to give you an opportunity if you have any questions you want to address to anyone, Mr. Chairman, so that you have that opportunity, and then you can tell me to go on to the next letter.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and I will read the name and address as best as I can determine it from the correspondence that we have. I do believe I have my technical issues taken care of, so I hope I don't go away. So I will begin. The first letter is from Rod Pattershuk at 511 Zerker in Olivet. Mr. Pattershuk says, I am in favor of the proposal put forth by the developer before the TIF Commission, considering the development of Olive Boulevard and I-170. I believe I offer a unique perspective. In having studied the proposal and its iterations as a commissioner of the City of Olivet's Economic Development Commission, I have been a strong supporter of the Ladue School District, taxing district most affected by the TIF, and currently co-chairman of the Citizens Campaign committoladue.org for support of Proposition L, $26 million bond issue for building renovation and replacement. Being a real estate professional active in the area affected, as well as a resident from the east side of Olivet, the area most affected by the development. On all counts, I believe the development offers a positive outcome for all issues I've noted, as well as an overall positive impact for the residents and city of Olivet. That's the end of the letter, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carl. We can proceed to the next one.
Okay, thank you. This is from Suzette Weiss, 1128 Olivari Lane, Olivet. I am concerned with the proposed amendment to the TIF redevelopment plan, and based on my understanding, strongly oppose its approval. Olivet currently does not have a grocery store, while Costco does provide food-related products, and I am happy to see this as part of the development. Costco is not a true grocery store and requires a membership fee that not all residents want and or afford to pay. In order to meet the needs of all of our community, it would be beneficial to have Costco and a traditional grocery store. I would assume there is general agreement that a food store is needed, or a grocery store and a Costco would not have been part of the original plan. Issues such as increased traffic and stressing educational resources aside, adding more apartment buildings instead of a grocery store would mean even more residents who themselves would also need groceries. More people with less public amenity flies in the face of making Olivet a more livable community. If there is concern that office space and retail would have reduced demand post-COVID, then why would the plan be to continue to proceed with those issues? And those concerned, perhaps unfounded or inappropriately elevated. Businesses such as restaurants and office space that are built amidst the pandemic have the opportunity to be designed with our new normal in mind. In fact, features such as improved ventilation and more environment-friendly design can put this development on the forefront of ingenuity. And a real draw for would-be tenants and patrons alike. While I am open to learning where I may be wrong in my understanding, even more apartments do not seem to make sense. While it's even harder, it makes it even harder to swallow the needs of over $23 million to fund such a project that I and many other residents do not want. This development should not be completed strictly for tax revenue. It should make Olivet a more desirable place to live. I appreciate your consideration. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carl. Mr. Yawitz, I don't know, there are a couple of items in there that I thought perhaps you might want to address. One is the question of whether Costco is going to be a part of this project. And two is something you touched on earlier, which is, I believe, whether the grocery store and apartments are an either or proposition.
Gotcha. So answer number one, no, Costco is not part of my project. That is contemplated in the University City project on the east side of 170. And number two, this is not an either or. As I said earlier, we are still working on getting a grocer and have the space to do that. In addition to what we are requesting relative to the apartments.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Carl, we can proceed to the next one.
Okay, this is from Mr. Mark Benacki, who is a neighborhood trustee. He lives at 31 Kentom Drive, Olivet. Mr. Brophy, I wish to express my family's support of the request of Keat Olivet Gateway to the TIF Commission for the addition of apartment use to the project and additional project-based incentives. The proposal is exactly what Olivet and the greater region needs to provide a diverse development for our community. The existing apartments in Olivet are all over 30 years old, and our city needs to be competitive in the market. I reviewed the information online and see the developer is reducing the percentage of incentives related to the project cost, which is a big positive for me. By adding more living options for Olivet, we can grow our community and provide options to those who wish to live in our city. The development has proven the developer has a proven long-term track record in Olivet at Price Crossing. Everyone in Olivet loves to go to the shops at Price Crossing. We are all very excited about what Olive Crossing will bring to the community and region. I look forward to the opportunity to address the commission during the Zoom meeting and share what many of the Olivet residents have asked me to share. We support this development. I urge the TIF Commission to vote to recommend approval of this to the Olivet City Council. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carl. We can move on to the next.
Okay. This is from David Palatnik. There is no address with this one, Mr. Chairman, that I see. Oh, I'm sorry, it's in the text. He lives at 26 Forsythia Lane. This is addressed to the city manager, Barb Sondag. Please forward this letter to Richard Brophy, chairman of the Olivet Gateway TIF Commission. My name is David Palatnik. I live at 36 Forsythia Lane, Olivet since 2016. I own CBD Crackdom at 2201 Olive Boulevard. Olivet disclosure, my landlord is Greg Yowitz, same as the developer of Olive Crossing. My wife Daphne and I are supporting the Olivet Crossing project and the changes that are proposed to it. Greg and his company has a history of maintaining great commercial spaces to benefit the city and its residents. We all love the great retailers and restaurants that Greg has brought over to Olivet, and the city's benefits from the taxing revenue. I worked closely with Greg on our building at 9201 Olive, even though the project was much smaller. It is a great example of how much time and money Greg is willing to spend on the exterior of the building so the entrance to Olivet will look better, and how he transforms an old, not so good looking vacant building into a great retail space. The cost of Olivet Crossing is significant, and while there are lots of costs to construction projects this size, Greg has spent a lot of extra time and money to make sure this project will be done in a better way for the community compared to other commercial projects, and that is why he needs the support of the TIF Commission. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. We can move on to the next one.
Okay, this is from.
And by the way, just to make sure the commission doesn't lose their mind, we have maybe 6 more of these to go, including a lengthy one, which I think we're not going to read into the record fully unless Olivet's attorney says that we need to, but we can address that when we come to it.
Okay. And I do apologize because I'm reading from a monitor a little farther than I'm used to, so it's a little hard for me to stay on track. I realize that doesn't bring a lot of excitement to my reading. Next letter, Benjamin Renault, Magnet Drive in Olivet. I know that. As a resident of Olivet, I am in support for the project specifically because a grocery store is to be included in the development. I find it quite bothersome that Olivet is a grocery store desert in which I must travel to neighboring communities in order to purchase food. It is my understanding that developers of the property would like to modify the plan in flight and remove the grocery store. While the departure of the grocery store from the development plans, my support for this project would vanish and be replaced with a feeling of being deceived. I ask if the commission believes it is beneficial for the people of Olivet to be able to purchase groceries within the city limits of Olivet without having to travel and pay tax to other communities. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carl. We can proceed to the next one.
Okay, Mary O'Reilly, 9 Olivet Hills Drive, Lina Hill Drive, Olivet. It is my understanding that the developer has eliminated the grocery store component of the planned project and is requesting further tax incentives so that they can add a large number of apartments to the complex. The original plans for this site that the community approved enthusiastically several years ago were small scale, attractive, and in keeping with the surrounding community. It has grown beyond any recognition and with very little, if any, discussion with the larger community. It will significantly impact the area and not in positive ways. There are a number of other apartment complexes being built in the area already, which will heavily impact our roadways and our retail establishments. Rather than even more apartments on the Olivet Crossing side, I would strongly prefer retail and sit-down restaurants. I am against providing this developer more incentive only so that they can build apartments for commuters who will have no commitment to the community. That's it, Mr. Chairman, for that one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carl. I believe the next one is from Mr. Hilberg. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I'll note that this came in 3 parts and is multiple pages long, including tables, which include statistics and so forth. I'm inclined not to read this verbatim unless, Mr. Martin, you see some concern with us simply taking this one into the record of the meeting.
There isn't any requirement that you read any of the letters verbatim, and this document, along with the other letters, has been shared with the commission members, at least that's my understanding, and
Yes.
will be posted on the city's website. So the long answer to your question is no, you don't have to read it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin. Then we're going to skip Mr. Hilberg's comments, not in any way other than by not reading them on the record here this evening, but as Mr. Martin indicated, they'll be available to the commission as well as to the public at large. So obviously you put a lot of effort into this. I don't want to diminish that, but given its length, it makes it difficult for us to read it this evening. So with that, Mr. Carl, would you mind moving on to the next letter, which I believe is from Mr. Busker?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. This is addressed to Ms. Sondag, the city manager. It's from David Busker, founder and president of Franchise Vision. He lives at 13 Heather Hill Lane. He says, as a resident for Olivet for 11 years and having served as a former TIF Commission chair for this project, I would like to offer my support for the revision request made by Keep Properties to the project at to 170 and Olive Boulevard. Based on my understanding, the new tax revenues relative to the project costs will drop from 19.4 to 15.15%. As a former real estate developer, I can appreciate just how difficult this site is to get redeveloped and the adjustments required to adapt to market demands and our unbelievably fast-changing economic climate during the project cycle. If the market is finding a higher and better use for this location, and we have a joint willingness of private development capital and a sensible TIF for public improvements, as a resident, I believe we should not let this opportunity lapse due simply to fatigue and changing market dynamics. We should take the proper measures to get it completed, including approving this revision request. Thank you to the TIF Commission for your time. I am also assuming that I am no longer part of the commission since I was not informed previously of the meeting. Okay, that's it, Mr. Chairman, for that one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carl. I believe we have 3 remaining.
Three remaining, and they're all relatively short. Okay, the next letter is from Dan Becker, 15 Heather Hill Lane, Olivet. As a longtime resident of Olivet, I want to express my full support for Olivet Crossing project by promoting the developer's TIF application. This is the next logical step to bring more dynamic living conditions and supporting businesses to our community. The project will bring more downstream tax revenue to the city, providing even more funding for future improvements and upkeep. Having additional funding for this project will certainly maintain the aesthetic integrity of the project and additional appeal for the renters, both resident and commercial. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carl. Next.
Next one is from Shalina Shenoy. Dear Mr. Brophy, I'm sorry, he's at 1 Heather Hill Lane, Olivet. Dear Mr. Brophy, we are writing in support of the application made by Mr. Yowitz on the Olivet Crossing project to convert one building project from commercial to residential use. Olivet is a very residential location, and this would be enhanced that goal. We think it should be also decrease the traffic congestion at that junction. I am writing this letter on behalf of my husband, Surendra Shenoy, and myself. Thank you for your consideration. And finally, I'll go on to the next one, Mr. Chairman.
Lost my cursor. Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Carl.
Sure.
Last one.
The final one is to Ms. Fleming, which is the Olivet Communications Manager. It says, my apologies. I cannot attend this evening's commission meeting due to personal conflicts. I have a few brief questions, below that I hope will be addressed. Per the documentation provided, the commission is recommending that the TIF be increased by 5.42 million. The verbiage is below. And here are the questions. What happens is the TIF is, I believe it should be, what happens if the TIF is not approved by the commission?
And Mr. Carl, if I could pause for a moment there. Mr. Spiker, I don't know if you want to comment on that, just so the public is aware of what happens if this amendment is not approved.
Well, if the amendment is not approved, it can go to city council. City council could approve it with a supermajority, although there was a change in the TIF Act 2 or 3 years ago, which would limit the use of TIF revenues, which would cause basically would make this project impossible. So short answer would be that in all likelihood, the project would not move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Spikerman. Mr. Carl, if you wouldn't mind, go on to question number 2.
Certainly. Why is the commission considering supporting this extension of the TIF? This seems to be attributed to errors in judgment and overly aggressive expansion of the project by the contractor. Why should the residents be on the hook to bail out the contractor for lack of foresight, balancing of risk? In other circumstances, real estate developers bear the risk of loss with the offsetting potential of increased gain. It remains unclear why the residents of Olivet should be expected to incur further assessments for a project that has significantly strayed from the original intent. And my apologies, I don't believe I read the person who sent this letter. That is Al Snyder at 160 Stoneleigh Towers, Olivet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is the last letter.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. Thanks everyone for your patience as we've gone through that. Mr. Yawitz, I don't know if you want to respond to that last question.
Sure. So I think I got it. I think there were 3. One is the TIF was changing because of lack of foresight. Actually, no, I think it's actually the opposite. It's a vision. And it's actually an exponential growth in our spending and a reduction in the commensurate TIF percentage. And then there was a comment made about the city being on the hook, or whether the developer was on the hook. We are on the hook. The TIF, as all of you, I think, on the commission know, and maybe the residents don't, the TIF is created through revenue created by the development of the project. The city itself is not financially responsible for that. We are. And so just to clarify, this is not from a lack of foresight. I believe it's from a gain of vision and the ability to consider the changes that have hit the world as well as the market. And I think that, to be clear, the city is not on the hook for the TIF. We're creating revenue and harnessing 15% of it effectively.
Thank you, Mr. Yawitz. I believe,
Chairman?
Yes, please.
I apologize for being chatty tonight, but that letter prompts maybe a thought that some of our residents may not completely understand the operation of the TIF, and it mentioned in there on the hook, which I think Mr. Yawitz addressed, the city is not, but I think it also mentioned in there something about additional resident assessments. And maybe Mr. Spikerman or Mr. Martin might want to address how a TIF does or does not impact city residents per assessment.
I'll be happy to. We can state affirmatively that the TIF does not do a lot of things. It does not directly raise the assessments or taxes of any neighboring properties. The TIF is limited in life to 23 years. That 23-year clock has already started. It started with the initial approval of the TIF. So we're not extending the duration at all. That 23-year clock has already ticked. There's about 19 years left. The city is not on the hook. The TIF only pays out to the extent the development creates new tax revenues. It doesn't affect tax revenues that are already there. Those will continue to flow to all the taxing districts. Is there anything else you'd like me to cover?
No, I think that's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Spikerman. I'll note again that there are a lot of materials on the internet on Olivet's website about this and about how TIFs work in general. So if you have questions, the internet is your friend and can provide a lot of information about this particular project as well as how TIFs operate in general. Now on to the written comments from the taxing jurisdictions. I know that we received a letter from the Ladue school districts, among other things, requesting an extension of the voting period until April 13th. I believe we've addressed that. Are there other written comments from the taxing jurisdictions, Ms. Sondag, that we've received?
The only letter we had was that there were no comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Then with this, I think we'll adjourn the public hearing portion of this evening's festivities. I don't know, given the fact that we're moving the actual vote until April 13th, is there anything that we need to do at this point, Ms. Sondag, that you're aware of?
I would just request that we actually do have a quorum on that April 13th date. It didn't seem to, it wasn't clear that there was a quorum.
My understanding is that no one had a conflict. In other words, everyone's available on April 13th at 6 p.m. The only caveat being that there's a 6:30 meeting that potentially conflicts. So we'll need to be efficient with our time, and I certainly intend to do so. So with that, we'll set the vote for April 13th at 6 p.m. Ms. Sondag will send out another Zoom invite, and we'll publish information about that vote on the website as well. Is there any other business that we need to attend to before adjournment this evening?
Mr. Chair.
Excuse me, do we need to close the public meeting before we do any other business or adjourn?
I did indicate that I'm closing the public hearing. Was there someone else who wanted to comment? Yes, Mr. McKenna.
Mr. Chair, just would this be an appropriate time to ask a few clarifying questions? Is that allowed?
Yes, absolutely. In other words, commission discussion. Yes, certainly it's allowed. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. First, I just want to, there's a lot of talk about this grocery store being removed. And perhaps I believe this probably for Mr. Yawitz. In previous development plans, was a grocery store ever expressly stated, or was that just considered as part of the general retail use? Was there ever any language in any of these plans that said there's going to be a grocery store specified? Or was that it just was generally assumed to be part of just the whole retail use of the development overall?
You want me to answer that question?
If you're the appropriate person.
Yeah, sure. So the answer is, I've always said, one of my goals is to deliver a grocery store. We've never had one locked in, so I could never commit to that. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the chains that had issued us a term sheet, unfortunately closed up nationwide. So that became, if you will, a non-option. So it's been something that I have said is something I have wanted to do, but it was never guaranteed to happen. And to add to that, none of our financial models contemplate that, such that in the event we do get it, which is my hope that we will, the projections we're making for revenue will be exceeded dramatically by the massive increase in sales tax that will accelerate the pay down of the TIF, and it will ensure that the jurisdictions get well more than we promised.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I just wanted to note that for the public's benefit, there's been a lot of talk about removing that from this plan. I just want to, again, just thank you, Mr. Yawitz, for that clarification. Nothing was actually removed in terms of language about a grocery store. So thank you very much. I do have other questions, but I'll wait.
No, please go ahead. Yeah, I think maybe before you comment, my understanding has been that there's always been interest in having a grocery store. I personally have an interest in having a grocery store as part of this development. I think that Mr. Yawitz is in favor of having a grocery store as part of this development. It's just a matter, as always, of getting the right grocery store to commit to being a part of the development. So we're all in, I shouldn't speak for everyone, but certainly it sounds like there's a general strong interest in having that be a part of this, and nothing has changed in that regard.
If I can continue, Mr. Chair, there was a statement about private investment being doubled, and just again, mostly for the public's benefit, is there somewhere specifically in the cost benefit analysis or in any of the documents that we have where those figures can be seen? I couldn't necessarily identify that. That's partly just my unfamiliarity with, that document. So if you could point that out, I don't know about necessarily a specific page number, but a certain table that could be helpful. Mr. Struckoff or whomever, Mr. Chair, you think's appropriate.
There's a table on page 2 of the amendment to the redevelopment plan that breaks down $151 million in expected cost investment.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, Mr. McKenna?
Yeah, just one more, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. In terms of the residential, the multifamily addition to this, it was stated in your presentation, Mr. Yawitz, about the affordability. What are we basing that statement on? Do we know the specific type of complex that's going to be in here? Do we know the perhaps maybe some figures about rent that might be charged at that place? What are we, aside from not putting a down payment on a house, what would make this an affordable place to live?
So that primarily that's my belief, right? It is that Olivet is a very hard to access place to live, given the fact there aren't a lot of rental options, and you must come up with a down payment to purchase a house, combined with the fact that the existing apartment stock, for the most part, is not less than 35 years old. And so, when we say affordable, are they affordable housing units as defined under HUD for tax credit purposes? Absolutely not. These will be market rate. They will be in line with the general market at the time we open them. We have some modeling forecasts on what we think those revenues are going to be and what those rents will be. And they'll be in line with everything around us for the most part, of the same vintage. For example, apartments in Creve Coeur, the View, the Vanguard Heights, there's a number of complexes in the area. I don't have the exact rents off the top of my head, but they will be in line with the market. So maybe affordable isn't the right exact term, but I want to make Olivet accessible to people and not have to have them choose a 30, 40, or 50-year-old apartment to rent if they can't afford a house.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yawitz. Thank you, Mr. Chair and commissioners, for putting up with my questions. Appreciate it.
Oh, no, this is what this is all about. You're absolutely welcome. Any other comments or questions from the commission?
This is Paul Hample. I had one, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Kevin addressed some of what I wanted to discuss. First of all, do you have an estimate at all of what range of rental prices you expect to get for these apartments? At least an estimate?
I think actually, Jason, you want to take that one?
Sure. So, these things range based on the unit type, so studios to 3 bedrooms is, kind of the way these are sized in the marketplace. We can provide a breakdown as to exactly how we've divided them up in terms of unit style. Typically we developers use price per foot, which really doesn't mean much to the public, but the marketplace kind of north of Clayton there is about a $210 to $225 per square foot market. A 1 bedroom might be $1,800, it might be $1,500, in that range. It really is market based. One thing that we don't try to do as developers, and we've built and owned in Clayton and downtown and in the Grove and Central West End, is we don't set prices based on the construction costs. If the construction costs and the deal economics don't make sense, then we choose to move to a different project. So the market will really determine where we end up setting, and the demographics that choose to live in the building is really a market-based decision, not a developer one. But a rental unit for a 1 bedroom of the 600 to 750 square foot variety is about $1,750 in that kind of 170 corridor in and around Clayton. Downtown Clayton's a little higher.
I would like to note also, thank you for that answer. I would like to note also that improving equity in St. Louis County has been a top priority for County Executive Sam Page. And I am concerned as to whether any consideration whatsoever has been given to what kind of racial diversity you hope to establish within the apartment complex.
It's a great topic. Greg, I don't know if you want to address that. I can just say that, you know, as an apartment manager and owner, we're fairly, you know, restricted as to any preferences whatsoever that we can address. So it's not that we don't think about those things. We as a company at KDG and Keeley Companies have several initiatives that we work on. I'd like to think and would love to, you know, speak at another time as what some of those initiatives are in terms of how we spend our time and where we make our investments. Greg, do you want to try to steer this one differently than just renting apartments? Because renting apartments is very much an equal opportunity endeavor. I want to make sure I stay on that front, both demographically as well as racially.
Yeah,
Not trying to skirt the question.
Yeah, I to a sense, I don't quite, the question's in a sense foreign for me because we're going to build an apartment complex for people who want to live in that apartment complex. And so I don't know. I don't know. To a certain extent, I don't.
You know, Greg, I don't even know if it's fair for us to be stuttering through this. Like we should have a great response to this, Mr. Hample. We really should.
Well, surely, Greg, it shouldn't come to any surprise to you that there will be people who would like to live there who can't afford to.
And we do encounter that in a lot of our projects. And it's like Greg said before, this is not an affordable with a capital A development. This is a market rate development. And when people approach us and don't qualify via, you know, the stated underwriting that you know, a management company would have to do for anyone to be able to prove out that they can afford to rent, you know, we go through a process and see if we can do it. But the key is that we have to treat everyone absolutely the same when they walk in the door. That goes whether they are a student, they are a senior citizen, they are
I think we lost you there for, we've lost your volume there, Jason.
So Jason, I'll finish. And Paul, to your point, right? So number one, we treat everyone the same. So that's why the question to me was a little bit, I guess I was off because it's a non-issue for me. If you're applying it relative to people who can't afford it, that challenge I think is different for us in that we are not developers of, that's a completely different type of development of multifamily units. That's not something we contemplated given this location. And so that would be a change of direction, if you will. That is just not something, you know, we are building a market rate development. The challenge of affordability to me is different than what I interpreted your question to be.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I do have one more, and I believe this is probably for Mr. Yowitz. And I don't know how far beyond the scope of what we're talking about today this really is, but in terms of, so if this project is approved, can you enlighten me a little bit on like what's then the process? Do you guys already have contractors decided for all of this? Is that something that then gets bid out later on? Can you kind of, again, for my benefit and for the public, could you enlighten me a little bit on what those steps look like and maybe timeline if you can?
Absolutely. So, you know, my hope tonight was that obviously you were going to vote. That's not going to happen. Our first step will be the site work, and we've been soliciting bids around St. Louis for that work. There are, as you can well might imagine, a whole lot of different divisions of work here, whether it's the site work, the utilities, the infrastructure, the roads, the buildings, the electrical deployment, you know, so we will be doing a very extensive amount of bidding. All our bids will be open as all of the work that I do at my center is. If I'm doing renovation work, I seek bids from the public. So I know we have some guidelines under a redevelopment agreement that we'll need to follow. Given the, if you will, our location, right? It's a highly public location. So I think that's going to give us the ability to make sure that the entire community knows, the construction community knows that we're out for bid. And we'll be looking for great quality contractors to do work at reasonable prices. Lowest price isn't always the best. It's a process, and it'll be done just, from a timetable standpoint, it'll be done multiple times. We'll have one basis for the majority of the site work. Then when we do the apartment building, then when we do the retail buildings, then when we do the office building. So it's not necessary that everyone is going to be the same, may not be the same electrician, same plumber. There may be collaborative arrangements between multiple vendors. But my partner Rusty and his construction firm is going to oversee the construction of a majority of this, has a very robust and inclusive process for seeking bids in the community. I don't
Thank
know
you
if that.
very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, at this point, I guess I'll reiterate my question. Ms. Sondag, given that we're not going to be voting this evening, is there anything else for us to do in your view as it relates to the schedule for tonight?
No, but I would actually check with Mr. Spikerman and Mr. Martin.
Mr. Spike, Mr. Martin, any thoughts?
I'd just like to note that the minutes should reflect that the school board's request for a continuance on voting was granted by consensus to April 13th at 6 p.m. And I think that's sufficient.
I agree.
Okay.
Nothing else for me.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Any other business? Ms. Sondag has written other business on our list of items. Anyone else with other business? No.
I just have a comment. There are 9 questions and answers in the question and answer section. So I don't know how you codify that and bring that into the minutes and address those comments and questions, but they are there in case you didn't see them.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. I think the intention is that we would, in addition to this video, which is going to obviously is being recorded, we'll also capture all of those things and display them at the end of the video or in a separate document so that they'll all be part of the public record of the hearing. So with that, I guess my last question for this evening is, do we need a motion to adjourn or just a strong interest in adjourning? Maybe Mr. Spikeman and Mr. Martin, you could comment on that.
The safest thing to do is to always have a motion, but if the chair decides to adjourn the meeting without objection from any commission member, that's fine with me.
Okay. Then are there any objections to adjourning this evening's meeting? Hearing none, we will adjourn at 9:15 p.m. and I'll see you all again for the vote on April 15th at 6:00 p.m. Thanks very much for your time and attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.